I'm getting a divorce as soon as the inheritance is finalized. The voice stopped me in my tracks. I hadn't even knocked yet. Just standing outside the wedding suite with a bottle of water in one hand and a folded napkin in the other. I wasn't meant to hear anything. I wasn't even supposed to be there. Candela had texted me earlier saying she needed a moment to catch her breath. But her voice rang out clear and amused, cutting through the crack in the door as if it had been rehearsed. It works in Baton Rouge, too, she added, laughing lightly. Kyle's easy. I didn't move. Inside, I could hear the rustle of satin, the clink of makeup brushes, and her voice bright and polished like a sales pitch. There was another voice, too, deeper and male, faint, coming from a phone on speaker. I couldn't make out his words, but hers were as clear as glass. I'll stay just long enough to wrap up the trust. Then I'm done. Baby or no baby. I turned slowly, carefully, my hand tightening on the napkin. I walked back down the hallway past the floral arch I had personally helped arrange just that morning. I kept walking until I found the side door that led to the garden. There was no wind, no music yet, just early light filtering through the ivy. My chest felt hollow, but my steps were steady. I didn't cry. Not when I passed the table with Kyle's childhood photos, the one where he held up a frog with muddy hands and a proud grin. Not when I saw the seating chart where Candela had placed me at table 6 next to a man I'd never met. Not even when I opened my phone and hovered over the contact labeled Attorney M. Halden. I pressed call. No answer. I left a message. Hi, Margaret. I need you to pause the transfer. The Darton Trust, all of it. I ended the call and slid the phone back into my purse. My hands were shaking now, but not from fear. From clarity. I had just heard a confession, and I wasn't about to let it become a wedding vow. I didn't tell Kyle, not that morning. Not as he adjusted his tie in the mirror and asked if the bow tie looked crooked. Not as he grinned and said Candela had picked the fabric for the nursery curtains. Not even when he whispered, I can't wait to feel the baby kick. He looked so sure I nodded, smoothing the edge of his collar like I had when he was 8 and nervous about picture day. You look perfect, I said. My voice didn't shake. I sat through breakfast with his groomsmen, laughed politely at their jokes, and refilled the coffee pot when someone forgot. When Candela texted Kyle a photo of her veil, he beamed like he'd just been handed the moon. I studied his face in that moment. The joy, the awe, the utter devotion, and I swallowed it down. Back upstairs, I slipped into the hallway bathroom and locked the door behind me. That was where I let my hands tremble. I had nothing to prove to Candela. She thought I was the quiet one, the nurse, the helper, the woman who knew when to leave the room. She didn't know what it took to raise a child alone on night shifts and weekend doubles. She didn't know what it meant to sit beside a hospital bed watching machines breathe for your infant son, knowing you'd sell your own lungs if it would make him live. She didn't know that quiet didn't mean weak. It meant watchful, strategic, patient. I pulled out my phone and opened the message thread with Margaret Halden. Pause all transfers from the trust immediately. Do not finalize anything Candela Vero is listed on. I hit send. Then I deleted the thread. Outside the window, the venue buzzed with activity. Florists arranging centerpieces, waiters wheeling silver carts through gravel paths, distant laughter from the bridesmaids' suite. But I stood alone, steady in my silence. I wasn't going to scream. I was going to plan. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my desk with the lamp turned low and the manila folder Candela had handed me the week before, resting beside a cold cup of tea. She'd said it was just some documents to review, things her financial planner had suggested to speed along the paperwork for when the baby arrived. It wasn't the first time I'd been asked to hand over control, but it was the first time it came wrapped in charm and monogrammed envelopes. I pulled out my laptop and opened the encrypted email thread with Dana Merrick, an old nursing friend who now worked for a family law firm in Baton Rouge. She was discreet, meticulous, and owed me more than a few favors. Her message came in at 2:41 a.m. Found 2 marriages under the name Candela Marie Vero, one dissolved after 9 months. The man filed for bankruptcy shortly after. The other ended in a contested divorce. She got the condo. I reread it twice. There was no mention of children, no mention of any long-term employment, just a trail of short-lived vows and long-term consequences for someone else. I turned back to the papers on my desk. The language was polished but aggressive. If I'd signed these and Kyle had added his name later, as Candela kept suggesting, most of the trust assets would be considered joint marital property. Easy to split, easy to vanish. I didn't shred them. I didn't burn them. I tucked them into an envelope, sealed it, and locked it in the bottom drawer of my desk. Then I slid the key into the back of my jewelry box behind the locket I hadn't worn in years. At 3:15, I finally turned off the lamp. Kyle still believed in her, still smiled when she brushed invisible lint from his shoulder and called him her rock. But patterns don't lie, and people don't just change because they put on white. By morning, I had already printed the contact card of a private investigator. I wasn't chasing drama. I was confirming what I already knew in my gut. Dinner was meant to be casual, just the immediate family, a few close friends, and trays of catered comfort food warming beneath silver domes. Kyle pulled out a chair for Candela, who sat with one hand on her belly and the other twirling her water glass. Everyone asked about the baby. Candela had answers for all of them. Still craving peaches, she smiled. Still can't stand garlic. I swear he's already picky. She was magnetic. I'll give her that. She knew just when to laugh, when to glance toward Kyle like he was the center of her world. It was convincing until it wasn't. So one of Kyle's coworkers leaned in. Any ideas for a name? Candela grinned. Oh, we've tossed a few around. I like Micah. Silas likes it too. Silence. Not long, barely a second. But enough. Kyle laughed. You mean I like it? Candela blinked. Her smile didn't falter, but her hand froze mid-gesture. Right, she said quickly. Sorry, brain fog. Someone made a joke about baby brain. The moment passed. But not for me. That name stuck in my mind like a shard of glass. Silas. I waited until everyone had gone home. Kyle stayed to help with the dishes. Bless him. But Candela said she was tired and went upstairs to rest. Her phone buzzed on the counter not 5 minutes later. The screen lit up. Esmeralda missed call. Then again, Esmeralda missed call, and again. I picked up the phone not to open, not to scroll, just to look. I took one photo. Then I set it down exactly as it was. When Kyle returned from the garage with the trash bag, I was pouring the last of the tea down the drain. He kissed my cheek and said goodnight with that same sweetness I'd spent decades nurturing. I turned off the kitchen light and climbed the stairs without a word. In my room, I transferred the photo to my cloud folder and labeled it Backup 1. Then I sat on the edge of my bed, hands folded, heart steady. One more thread and her web would start to collapse. I arrived at the venue an hour earlier than anyone expected. I told the planner I wanted to check the floral arrangements, make sure the white hydrangeas hadn't browned overnight. She nodded, distracted by a clipboard and a dozen other concerns. The bridal suite was empty. Sunlight poured in through the window, casting soft shadows across the vanity. A curling iron lay unplugged and a pair of slippers rested beside the lounge chair. I walked in slowly, scanned the room, and set the water vase on the side table like I belonged there. Then I reached into my handbag and pulled out the recorder. It was small, matte black, and already set. I slid it beneath the seat cushion of the tufted love seat, deep enough that no one would notice, but clear enough to catch every word. The room was known for its acoustics, high ceilings, polished walls, and no soft rugs to muffle sound. I stepped back, smoothed the pillow into place, and left without glancing behind me. That afternoon, after the brunch, I sat in my car in the back lot, parked beneath the shade of an overgrown oak. I pulled the recorder from my bag and pressed play. There was static at first. Then the creak of the suite door heels across hardwood and Candela's voice. Lighter than usual, giddy. He still thinks the baby's his god, I'm good. There was a pause, a soft laugh. Then once the dart and truss clears, I'm out. That name should be mine already. The rest was muffled. Someone on speaker murmuring agreements I couldn't quite catch. Candela giggled again. It's almost too easy. I sat perfectly still. Windows rolled up, no air. I let the recording play through once more, slower the second time. Every word carved deeper. Then I plugged the recorder into my laptop, saved the file, and transferred it to a USB. I labeled the file with the wedding date and slid the flash drive into the side pocket of my purse right behind a packet of tissues and a tube of lip balm. Tomorrow she would wear white, but I was no longer waiting to see if anyone else noticed the stain. Eric was young, maybe 24, with steady hands and a permanent headset hugging one ear. I found him crouched near the back of the reception hall, adjusting one of the wireless mics for the officiant. "Excuse me," I said quietly. He looked up, polite but distracted. "I need your help with something small." "It's for the ceremony." He stood, brushing dust from his pants. "Sure, ma'am. What do you need?" I handed him the USB. "There's a file on here. Audio only. I want you to play it through the main system when I give you a signal." His brow furrowed. What kind of signal? I held up my right wrist. A thin silver bracelet with a charm shaped like a tiny pine cone. When I touch this like this, play the file just once. No intro, no fade in. Full volume. He glanced at the USB, then at me. Does the couple know they will? I said evenly. He shifted his weight. I don't usually do surprises during weddings. It's risky. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a check already filled out. I doubled the going rate for private AV consulting. His eyes dropped to the amount, then widened slightly. No questions, I added. Just press play when I touch the bracelet. He took the check, then the USB. I'll cue it now, he muttered, plugging it into his laptop and slipping the file into the event program list. I nodded once and walked away. Outside, the sun was just starting to warm the flagstones. Guests mingled around the garden, sipping champagne. Candela's laughter floated through the air like ribbon, effortless and polished. I spotted her through the archway, gesturing toward her bouquet with theatrical flourish. Kyle stood beside her, oblivious. I touched my bracelet briefly. A rehearsal gesture, muscle memory. Tomorrow she would wear her lies like lace. But today I'd lace the room with something sharper, something that didn't wilt. Something that would ring through the speakers like a bell. The music swelled. Something soft and stringed and too sweet for what was coming. Guests rose to their feet in unison as Candela stepped into view. She moved like she belonged to the moment, the veil floating behind her hand, clutching a bouquet of lilies I had chosen. Her smile was practiced. Perfect. Kyle stood under the arch, his suit freshly pressed, his eyes locked on her like she was sunlight. I watched them both. The officiant greeted the crowd, voice warm and rehearsed. We are gathered here today to witness the union. I touched my bracelet. The crackle from the speakers was subtle, like the clearing of a throat. Then came her voice. He still thinks the baby's his, God. I'm good. A few guests turned their heads. Once the Darton trust clears, I'm out. That name should be mine already. Gasps rippled through the chairs. One woman covered her mouth. Another let out a breathless, "Oh my God!" Kyle blinked. His smile faltered. Candela froze at the top of the aisle, color draining from her face. The bouquet tipped slightly in her hand. "No," she said. That's not me." Her voice sounded tiny in the silence that followed, like something shrinking. Kyle took a step back. His mouth opened, but no words came. His eyes darted to me, then back to her, then to the speakers. "I can explain," Candela stammered. It was taken out of context." The officiant stepped aside. Someone in the back stood up slowly. Chairs creaked. Candela turned on her heel, the train of her gown dragging behind her like the end of a curtain. She moved too fast, nearly stumbling as she reached the side aisle, pushing past startled guests. No one followed her. Kyle didn't move. I stayed where I was, one hand resting in my lap. The music had stopped, but the truth had played loud enough, and that was all I needed it to do. Kyle didn't speak. He turned and walked straight out of the ceremony space, his steps heavy and mechanical. I followed him only with my eyes as he disappeared through the side hallway. A groomsman called after him, but Kyle didn't answer. He reached the dressing room door and shut it firmly behind him. The lock clicked. Candela was outside. Moments later, she pushed back her veil, face blotched and furious. She shoved past a guest and tried to head toward the hallway, but 2 security staff stepped in front of her. I didn't know who summoned them. Maybe the planner, maybe the venue manager, but they stood their ground. "I need to talk to him," she snapped. "He doesn't understand." It was a joke. "Just a joke." One guard shook his head. He asked for space. She tried again. "You can't just... This is our wedding." The other guard leaned in. "Not anymore." Candela's mouth trembled. Her fingers clenched the bouquet until the stems cracked. She scanned the room for allies and found none. Her bridesmaids hovered at a distance, uncertain. Someone handed her a wrap. She didn't take it. I turned away. In the back of the reception hall, my phone buzzed. One message from Margaret. "Trust remains untouched. Documents never executed. No legal claim." I stared at the screen for a long moment, letting the confirmation sink in. I'd kept Kyle's name off the paperwork just long enough. Candela had no leverage now. No baby would bind her to our family. No loophole would give her our legacy. I slipped the phone into my clutch and stepped outside. The air smelled of rosemary and candle wax. The violinist stood in the corner with his instrument still in hand, unsure whether to pack up or play. The ceremony chairs remained in rows, neat and untouched. But on the floor near the altar, the veil lay where Candela had dropped it. Crumpled, forgotten. Its edge had been singed slightly, where it caught a loose tea candle. No one picked it up, and in the silence that followed, I knew Kyle would come find me when he was ready. He came 3 days later, just as the sun was settling behind the trees, casting long golden shadows across the porch. I was clipping back the rosemary bushes when I heard his steps on the gravel. No words yet, just the sound of someone carrying more than they could say. Kyle stood at the bottom of the steps, his tie loosened, his jacket wrinkled. His eyes found mine. You knew. I set the shears down carefully. Yes. He didn't move for a moment, just breathed hard, like each word had weight. How long? Long enough. He looked away, jaw clenched. Why didn't you tell me? I sat down on the bench and gestured for him to join me. He hesitated, then did. Because if I told you, I said softly, you would have defended her. You would have said I misunderstood or that people change. He didn't deny it. I needed you to see it, Kyle, on your own, with no one to shield you from it. He rubbed his palms against his knees. She lied about everything. Yes, I said. He went quiet, staring out at the rosemary, the fence, the street beyond it. But I knew it wasn't any of those things he was seeing. I feel stupid, he whispered. You weren't stupid. You were in love. He swallowed hard, his voice low. She said the baby was mine. I didn't speak. There was nothing to say that wouldn't reopen something raw. After a long pause, he leaned back against the wall of the house. I can't believe I almost signed everything over. You didn't. She would have taken it all. But she didn't. His shoulders dropped slightly. The first sign of release. Then we closed the curtain, I said. More to him than to myself. We don't chase after ghosts. Kyle nodded once slowly. We sat in the quiet for a few more minutes. No questions, no rehashing, just stillness. A mother and her son in the space between betrayal and healing. Then I rose and opened the door behind us. Candela was gone within the week. No goodbyes, no forwarding address. Just a single call to Kyle's phone that went unanswered and a social media profile wiped clean by the time anyone thought to check. Word spread quietly, as it always does, in small circles. She'd moved somewhere out west. New job, new last name, same script. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. Spring crept in as if nothing had happened. I cleared the wilted flowers from the ceremony arch and turned the soil in the back garden. The rosemary was stubborn this year, but I didn't mind the extra effort. Some roots, after all, are worth the work. Kyle stopped by more often. No explanations, no promises, just quiet visits. He brought groceries. Sometimes coffee, once a small potted lemon balm plant he said looked like something I'd raise better than he could. One afternoon, while unloading a bag of apples and flour from his car, he glanced at me. Will you ever use the trust? I wiped my hands on a dish towel. Yes, I said, for someone who won't ask for it. He nodded, not insulted. Just understanding. We never spoke of that day again, or of the daughter-in-law I almost had. Some truths were meant to stop a wedding, not define a life. That evening, he stayed for dinner. We made apple pie from scratch. He peeled the apples. I worked the crust. When it came out of the oven, golden and warm, he smiled for the first time in weeks. I poured us both tea and set the tray down gently on the table. Then I dimmed the kitchen lights, pulled the curtain across the window, and let the day end just like that. Quiet, whole. And finally ours.